Hey everybody, welcome back to the Modern Customer Podcast. I'm your host, Blake Morgan. Food is a really big deal in my house. I have 2 little kids and we are always snacking. It is just how we eat. We have 3 small meals and 2 snacks a day, at least. So snacking is of interest to me, and so is food. And I'm so excited about the guest that we have today. On the Modern Customer Podcast, we are talking to Harry Overly, the president and CEO of Sun-Maid Growers of California. Harry did an overhaul on the brand, focusing on innovation and taking all of his experience from many CPG companies, including being the CEO of D'Olio, the seller of the largest olive oil brands in the world, like Bertolli olive oil. Sun-Maid is total Americana in marketing. Everybody knows the Sun-Maid raisin box with the girl on the cover with the hat in the sun. Everyone knows that little red box. Today, Harry and I are talking about how Harry reinvigorated the brand by focusing on customer service and innovation. And he talks about why it's important to really spend time and listen to the customer and, frankly, what's going on with them. I know you will enjoy this conversation. Let's get to it. Harry, welcome to the Modern Customer Podcast. How is life going today in the Fresno area?
Well, this time of year, it's pretty hot. So I think we're on our 30th day north of 100 degrees, so typical time here in the valley.
You're right, right. So I did read, though, that the climate there is ideal to grow grapes and grow raisins. So I guess that's why you're there, right?
Right, yeah, the industry started here a long time ago, so 150 plus years ago or so. And the climate was most like you would see in a Mediterranean type of environment, so arid, and you've got a lot of period of dryness, and then you kind of get a winter season and a rain season, and then it allows for products, particularly agricultural products like ours, to flourish during cool times, and then it gives them the heat they need to essentially develop rapidly.
All right, so let's take a step back and hear your story. Your role is so unique, being CEO of Sun-Maid. Tell us how you came to be in that role and your career story.
Sure. Well, I started my career way back when in food science and product development. So I was one of those guys that would actually formulate products and be out on production lines in the middle of the night with our operations teams trying to test whether it's new formulas, new equipment, et cetera. And always been fascinated with innovation and developing new things. And as I got a little bit further into my career in the larger packaged goods companies such as Kraft Foods and Wrigley way back, realizing that I have a passion for leadership, a passion for strategy, and really a high degree of intellectual curiosity of not just, hey, how is the product made, but why do people want the product and how can we make them want more of the product? So I'm one of those individuals that really likes to see it from the very start all the way to the very end. And understand every element of that, whether that's working with customers, retailers, in this case, at Sun-Maid being an agriculturally based company, working with growers literally in the dirt on the vineyards. And so I worked my career through various roles in between marketing, innovation, and both domestically and globally. So I had a lot of success at the Wrigley Company, where I was one of the co-developers of the 5 gum brand,
Oh,
which is the
wow.
black pack gum that you'd see out there, and led that team with a partner from concept all the way to commercialization. And then, had an entrepreneurial itch in me and decided that instead of taking the typical CPG marketing track, that I was going to see if I could use my skills to take a smaller organization and make it much larger and successful. And I was fortunate that throughout my work developing some external manufacturing relationships, that I came across a company that offered me the ability to join them. And what was unique about them was they were trying to take confectionery delivery forms in dosage formats and deliver over-the-counter pharmaceuticals, which really hadn't been done before. And so today, a product that you would see as an example of that would be the Tums product that looks like a Mentos and tastes and eats like a Mentos
Anybody
product.
that's
So our
had
team,
anyone that's had children knows that product because when you're pregnant, you get a bunch of problems. So you always have Tums.
yeah, no, my wife said the same thing, and my wife had really tough pregnancies, and she swears that that product works better than the tablets for her, and obviously tastes better. So, yeah, we did well and took that company forward, and then eventually I joined a company called Treehouse Foods, which at the time was about $1.5 billion or so. I was brought in to be the marketing vice president for its Sturm Foods division, which Treehouse was really forming at a great time in which retail brands or customer brands, as we would call them, private label, et cetera, were trying to come into their own. And the skill set that I was able to bring to the table, in addition to the leadership of kind of building the teams and the strategy, was working with those retailers to help understand, what was important to their shoppers. So whether I'm selling a red box of raisins or Walmart or Target is trying to sell their private label, there's a segmentation and a consumer behavioral aspect that exists that you need to understand. And that was a skill set that at that time retailers were figuring that out, particularly coming out of the 2008 major recession of, how could their brands really appeal to new shoppers and how could they keep them in their respective franchises. And from there, I became CCO after a number of years, which is Chief Customer Officer, responsible for all of our channels. And the company grew through organic growth and acquisition to just under $7 billion or so. We acquired the ConAgra, part of the ConAgra business, late in 2015, 16. And from there, I chose it was time to move into a space where I was leading my own organizations. And so I decided to jump ship and joined a private equity group and became a portfolio CEO and worked in olive oil, which I thought from an agricultural base and market perspective was very interesting and really backwards and archaic in terms of methodology.
What year was that?
That would have been in 2016.
Okay.
Towards the end of 2016, and I was there for roughly a year and turned that business around. And as I came out of that opportunity, I was looking for a new one, and Sun-Maid came across my path. And at first, honestly, I was really questioning whether that would make a lot of sense because it is an agricultural co-op. So I work for roughly 700 farming families here in the Valley. And trust me, there's all 700 of them that would like to give their opinions on what we're doing with the business. And that is unique in the fact that ag co-ops is not very many of them around today. And so my concern when I was considering the opportunity was, hey, if they're going to run the business for cash to obviously the focus getting as much profitability back to the farmers and the growers, there's a lot of people who could do that for them and be happy doing so. If they're interested in really growing the company and doing something different with the company because it was such an iconic business, and they're willing to invest in it. So that's been the issue of why you don't see a lot of cooperatives around, is they typically don't invest in the businesses to the same levels as you see other packaged goods companies.
Can you explain, let me stop you. Can you explain for our audience what that business model actually is? They might not even know. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I don't have a ton of knowledge about how that would even work. Would you care to explain that?
Yeah, sure. So the way to just make it very simple, so an ag co-op, so I always joke it's a half public and half private, but it is technically a private entity. Feels public a lot. Is essentially let's say you're a grower of Sun-Maid. You're a member for us, and what that means is that all of your land, representative of your vineyard, you are obligated to give that product to the cooperative. And I am obligated to take all of that product. So at times when I'm getting too much, you could see that, I may have to find avenues to move that product, sell that product, et cetera, all with the aspiration of getting you as much money as I possibly can for that product. And so the way the model really works then is you deliver me the product, I set what would be a market-driven price to say, hey, I'm going to pay you this, based on the commodity price, wherever the market is. I'm going to commit to that price. And then at the end, after I've paid you that and we've marketed and sold the product all through, and it goes in crop years. So essentially just think about, right now we're going to harvest 22 crop, right? So everything gets paid against that total crop. And everything that's left at the end, so all the profitability, operating income of the business, is distributed back to the growers. So our job is to try to outperform that market, invest to keep growing the business, while continuing to, we aspire to keep paying them more and keep our growers sustainable and keep them in business. So yeah, it's somewhat like a private company, except we don't keep it and just put it to the balance sheet. We actually take the profits and redistribute it back out to the growers.
All right, so let's switch gears. So now we understand the business model, your background, which is really unique. It's great that you were a chief customer officer prior to being CEO. Let's talk about what you inherited when you joined the company. What did the marketing look like when you joined, and what was your goal in shifting it?
So interesting enough, so you come into an organization, one like Sun-Maid, where you've got this tremendous history, right? It's 100 years old, and tremendous emotional equity with the red box,
Right.
the red canister.
We all know the girl on the
etc.
box in front of the sun and the hat.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's one where I always joke with people that I wish I had a brand like this earlier in my career, because the funny part about Sun-Maid, it is so iconic that if we say anything, we can usually get it picked up by the press. Yeah, when I was selling Bertolli olive oil, I didn't have the same luxury. I had to fight to get, a mention. Let's talk about, healthy fats and cooking and that kind of
Right.
thing. But Sun-Maid, just because of how iconic it is, everybody's really interested to hear, what's going on with the business. And what I came into was there really was no marketing structure. There was a team here that I would call, more of a marketing services group. So they were, how they market to the growers, how they handle our annual shareholder meetings. And, there was some, I would call, kind of trade marketing work that was going on, but not really any major coordinated consumer work whatsoever. And that was the big challenge. And what got me really excited about coming to Sun-Maid and the opportunity was you have a brand that frankly wasn't nurtured for probably north of 15 years or so. And in that time, I joke with our team today, but it's half joking, half truth, in the fact that I think we skipped a generation of being relevant.
Right.
And now, the snacking world is so much different. We're not just competing in the dried fruit aisle, we're competing in the realm of snacking and share of stomach in the snacking space. And reframing that for our team.
Share of stomach, I like that. Yeah, you're competing with
Right.
all the ways we snack, which I don't know if snacking was, I don't remember if it was popular in the 80s, but like I know snacking is a big deal in my house, and we always have snacks in the cupboard, always.
Yep, hopefully Sun-Maid raisins.
Yeah,
And
I have kids, so of course.
That's good, right? So that's my point is, what we've seen with Sun-Maid is you today buy those products for your kids. Your kids, I also have 2 youngsters, and those kids will consume those products likely until they're 5 or 6. And when they're really in school and getting a lot more exposure to their friends and realizing what they get to eat, and they see all these different things, and then they're going to come home and they're going to ask mom and dad for all kinds of different stuff. And raisins don't become as fun anymore. And what we see is it kind of tails off in the household, and then, those children don't think about raisins, frankly, or particularly in purchasing raisins, until they're our age again, until they're having their own children.
Because they're used in baking though, right? Like when you say raisins to me, I just think of baking, like cookies and cakes and breads.
So there's that whole 15, 20 year span of no interest. And then, yes, you get into baking, you get into fun cooking, and typically grandma and grandpa are engaged at that point, and they're doing those things together along with mom and dad. And so we always joke is, hey, you buy it for your kids now, and then once your kids reach that age, let's say we're 30s, 40s, and then we don't buy them anymore until we're grandparents, and our kids have kids, and we get grandparents, and then we're buying them again. Now there's a little bit of exaggeration in that story, as boomers and greatest generation and older folks tend to be higher index to dried fruit in general due to the health benefits. But For the most part, that's what we see is the raisin leaves the household and then it emerges again. It emerges again, every 15, 20 years. And, our job is what I thought about how we need to reposition is, hey, we've missed a generation. And what is the future of snacking going to be? And it's going to be appealing to today's younger parenting households. We retargeted the business and repositioned all of our efforts against, at the time, was millennial moms. Today, I would say it's not necessarily just targeted millennial moms. You have Gen Z moms in there, but attitudinally and behaviorally, we call them the balancer mom. And the mom that really is looking for healthy alternatives, healthy products that can still be fun, but have some indulgence to them too, not essentially trying to have their kids eat kale at every meal as they possibly can. And, that they only get those type of snacks, but one that recognizes that, hey, the kids are going to want something that is sweet and fun for them, but mom wants to be happy and comfortable giving them those products and feel good about it, not just a candy bar.
So the way you're talking is interesting to me because you were a chief customer officer. Now you're a CEO, but you're speaking like a marketer or brand officer. So are you representative of a new CEO that really needs to be so many other things than just the chief strategist?
Yes, I would say depending on the type of business that you're in, particularly in my space where you're in packaged goods or the food industry, absolutely. I mean, and I could see it in other areas, where you're essentially selling a service or any product. For me, my job spans of, I like to understand in depth of how we're going to sell because I want to innovate and I need to invest in market to those consumers. So I need to understand the media tactics and the mix and how that ground is shifting for us. And so then you take that hat off and it comes down to, okay, well, what are the customers actually trying to achieve? How many customers do you think are trying to covet the millennial shoppers and appeal to them? And what tools are they using to do that? So what's Kroger doing? What's Walmart doing? Target, et cetera. And who's winning that battle? And why are they winning that battle? How do their strategies intersect with our strategies? And where can we work with them to maximize, the opportunity at those points? And then you carry that all the way back through, into the operations of ensuring that, we're running the business as efficiently as possible. That was one of the big challenges I had coming in here, is that there was one segment of the business that was not nearly as profitable as the other. And my mantra is, if we're going to be in a channel or a business, we're going to play to win in that business. And running the business in the red is not a sustainable strategy by any means. So we need to take some bold efforts to make some changes. And I'm very proud of our team of what they've done and how they've embraced the use of data and become more comfortable in making recommendations and making changes to drive efficiency within our operations.
So what were those points in the data that you and your team were looking for?
Well, when we look at on the operations side specifically, it comes down to what do you see in terms of utilization of your equipment and your assets. So we're a business, as I mentioned, likely an outsider coming in will have a skeptical eye of saying, hey, how well have they invested capital in their own business? And what I can tell you is there was a bit of under representation or under investment in some of the hard assets. And so what you really try to look at there is what's our utilization, how is that asset sweat out or fully depreciated or not. And we have instances where we've got equipment that is decades old, works well, but we're running the risk of the equipment manufacturers are no longer in existence, which means the parts manufacturers are no longer in existence. So you start thinking about the cost of the maintenance cost and upkeep that you have to put into a machine like that versus looking at, hey, maybe we need to invest to essentially right size and look at new capabilities to do it more efficiently. So I think that the big benefit, and well, I know the big benefit and the thing I'm most proud of is the team was not necessarily utilizing data to their advantage. And I looked at it and said, do we have the data, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you use data? And the team, to their credit, candidly said, we don't use it. We have all these nice dashboards in the plant and showing how we're running and that type of thing, but we're not using it and not using it to the degree we should be. And come to find out, we had a fantastic automation group that was capturing all of this information in terms of how equipment was running, downtime capabilities, et cetera, and it just wasn't being reviewed and utilized. And so we went to that as fast as we could, and we started creating the key metrics. So very simple. You have a machine that puts raisins in a box. How is that machine running all the time without any issue, or is it having problems? And if it is, how much downtime is attributed, and how much is that costing us? And are we training the people to fix it? Do we need to look at investment? But it was a matter of going through all of our assets and understanding and pointing to problem. What is the value then of showing them, hey, if we actually make the effort to train our people and invest and get the efficiency numbers up to, not even world class, but stellar performance, what is that value to the business? And let me show you how to get there. And in doing that, I've seen the team really embrace that, and they start making it their own. They start seeing it work when we start having small wins throughout the facilities.
But what about on the customer side? Because when I think of data, I mean, that's a big part of it. But what about like what's happening with your customers, and how much data do you get since so much of your product is sold through a third party?
We get a good amount of data in terms of consumption information, so IRI, and scanner data, so we could see what's coming across, the check lanes. A little more difficult when you look at, you've got the loyalty program, so you can dig into the shopper data. As some of them are capturing it right away at check lanes. Others, there's panel information where there's key shoppers that are always scanning everything at home to provide that information, that service back to the group. A little more tricky as you get into the omni-channel world and you look at the digital world. Amazon, for example, isn't one that always shares a lot of that information. So we're trying to build out some of those models and some of those tools with some of our partners. And then, the next step is, how to use that to your advantage, right? And Sun-Maid is the biggest dried fruit brand in the world. It's the biggest dried fruit brand here in the US, but we weren't acting like it at the shelf. And as a leader, what you really want to demonstrate for your retail partners is, how do I help you make your shelf more efficient? How do I help you sell more? Do you have the right assortment? Do you have the right products? We also took the information and started looking at trade analytics to understand, hey, are we promoting at the right times? Are there certain promotional price points that work better than others, right? That motivate consumers to buy? And frankly, we were finding that in our own business, there was a lot of wasteful spending in our promotional strategies. So our trade analytics people came to us and said, listen, any dollar that you spend buying price down between May and August 1 is a complete waste of money. Consumers are not in the market to buy it, and you just want to find the tip of when back to school starts coming into the fall is when it makes sense again. And so we were able to essentially start focusing our efforts on the key drive windows. For us, we call them drive windows, but as you would expect, it's back to school for snacking, it's the holiday season for baking and fun, and then it's return to school in January, and then it's the Easter timeframe. And that allowed us to really focus on being as efficient as possible, and in some instances having some tough discussions with retailers, right? Because we'd have to show them, like, hey, this isn't working for you. You're not getting any lift or benefit or any incremental sales from this, and we sure aren't either.
Right.
So we want to take this money and not necessarily just take it and pull it, but we want to reallocate it, and we want to go bigger at Easter, or we want to look at how we use your tools to target shoppers and customers and give them a different experience, whether that's through mobile, whether it's the online pickup applications that you're testing today, which the world is, as you know, has completely flipped over in the last 2 years, and really put the accelerator pedal down on those type of tools. But that allows us to be able to have that conversation, and sometimes it's more difficult to do so because you're trying to have to your point, the third party, your customer, understand how we're trying to work with them to actually get a win-win solution for everyone.
So we're nearing the end of the podcast. We're going to do the rapid fire round in just a minute. But last question for you, Harry. If you could give advice to a CEO with your customer experience hat on, what advice would you give to that CEO about how to run a company by focusing on customer experience?
I wish I could come up with something really novel there, but my answer would be really spend some time with your customers to understand what they appreciate about your business, what they think does well. Let them help you understand what they're about, and what they see, because they're essentially will help you define what your competitive landscape is, and therefore you can, or weaknesses in your business that may not be as apparent as one might think. So it will give you a bit of a game plan right away of how you may want to think about short and long-term strategies.
I don't think that's simple at all. I think that is just honest. And really, I think that's such a beautiful thing that most companies just don't do. So we've reached the rapid fire round so our audience can get to know you a little bit better. Harry, are you ready to take some quick questions?
Sure. Fire away.
All right, great. So you are stuck on an island. You have access to water, but you can bring one other food and one other drink. What are they?
Well, I think I'm supposed to say raisins coming along with that. One other food and one other drink. I would say probably some kind of snack mix of sorts, because I think nutritious and shelf and stable enough that it's going to last a while for me. And from a drink perspective, anything that I could think that would flavor that water to make it a bit more tasty,
Right.
and make me dream of other things.
Right. If you could have lunch with anybody dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one for me. As I mentioned, I have a pretty high degree of intellectual curiosity and real passion for leadership. But I think I've been asked this. I'll give you three, but I'll only focus on why really quickly, because I think they all have similar challenges. Tony Blair, Bill Clinton, and George W. Bush, for the fact of just the onus and the immensity of some of the challenges they faced, whether it was 9/11 for George Bush and how he had to navigate the country through that and lead the country through it, whether it's Bill Clinton in terms of, frankly, dealing with not too different than today's world, a highly politicized two-party system that had to figure out how to bridge gaps and work with people and get them to make progress. And Tony Blair for trying to figure out how to keep Europe sticking alongside of us. So I think just the leadership aspect of that would be enthralling to me to pick their brain a bit.
Love it. What is one tool that you used during COVID for self-development and growth?
I want to say a degree of meditation, I guess, and maybe the better way to describe it, heightened thoughtfulness, in the fact that, and really focusing on being present. So, like you, I have a family and little kiddos. We also, we had a COVID baby in 2021. And so, we have a 3-year-old right now. And we were spending, we shut our offices down. I would be in here, but I was at home more than I normally would be as well. And one thing I think is very challenging for anyone, but particularly on CEOs, is that how do you shut it off when you walk in the door and you see the family, and because you don't want to bring that stress home with you at all. And I'm usually pretty good at compartmentalizing, but when you're at home, you don't get whether it's the commute home, you don't get that anymore, right? So it is knock on the door and boom, they're right there, right. And so you got to shut it off really fast. And that's something that, I really tried to focus on, is how could I be present, both for my family, but same token, recognizing that I need to be really present for our employees and our teammates as well.
That is awesome. Lastly, if you had $1 billion, what would you do with it first?
I would, one thing that really has a lot to do with my upbringing as well, but is school lunch debt. For me, outside of saving and investing and making sure my family is taken care of and that kind of stuff, the passion that would come behind that is, if you read and you see how these kids today that, if they're less fortunate, they're not able to pay for school lunch, what they get in return or how the schools are able to, accommodate them is fairly disappointing. And that's not a reflection on the schools, just pretty much on the system. And, that's where I would like to see my efforts. I really get excited about trying to do something there. Sun-Maid is one that we've pointed our direction there in the last few years as well. And it's very sad to see that.
Well, I think that is a great cause to support. If people want to learn more about Sun-Maid and your story, how can they find you?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn, Harry Overly, or come to sunmaid.com or plumorganics.com, which is our latest acquisition of the baby food brand that we acquired from Campbell's Soup Company last year. But yeah, a lot of interest there at sunmaid.com.
All right. Well, this has been really interesting, and I hope you'll come back on the show. We can talk more about our COVID babies next time that we both have. Everybody, you've been tuning into the Modern Customer Podcast. Until next time.